now but do it next year when Australia's bringing in a similar system, and we could just piggyback on that. And obviously the whole Australasian market might be bigger. The moment we're out of step with everybody, and we're effectively asking Apple and those other entities to effectively become tax collectors on behalf of New Zealand IRD. And we all know that if the FBI can't get Apple to unlock a terrorist iPhone, I'm not quite sure what pressure we're going to be able to put on Apple to get them to collect our GST.
Look, we understood the logic, didn't we, when Lightbox had to pay GST and Netflix didn't? But are they the people we really care about? I mean, does this now give protection, do you think, to actual traditional retailers we do care about, like people who make little bits and pieces here and sell books, and those retailers we want to preserve?
No, not at all. That's still the big thorny nettle that the government's not willing to grasp. I mean, this new tax says if I buy an online book from Amazon, I've got to pay GST. If I import an actual hard physical copy of the book from Amazon, there's still no GST. So we're tackling a very small part, and IRD estimates that this is 40 million of GST on digital services, but they agree they're not even attempting to tax the 200 million on actual physical imports of goods that compete with New Zealand's bricks and mortar retailers.
So it will, I suppose, bring in a certain amount of revenue to government, even if it's not wholly successful or enforceable. Is that entirely a bad thing?
No, it's not, and the government had to be seen to be doing something, and I guess this is something, but in reality, given that IRD can't do much outside its own borders, it's relying on what it describes as reputational risk, that a lot of these companies, these large digital companies, have suffered a bit of reputational risk from their income tax arrangements. They won't want to be seen to be flouting any government's GST arrangements. But that's only going to apply to the big guys. The companies that don't consider they have any reputational risk, or that they see New Zealand as too small to bother with, there's nothing to make them comply. Interestingly, the IT knows this, so they're actually putting pretty draconian penalties on New Zealanders who deliberately try and disguise their address in order to avoid the GST. There's penalties of up to $50,000 for people who repeatedly use virtual private networks or provide false information about their address or use overseas registered credit cards to avoid this tax. By contrast, Apple and Google, who may simply make mistakes, the maximum fine they can face is only $12,000.
It's an interesting sounding law, isn't it, this new legislation. Mark, thank you for joining us to explain that. It comes into effect tomorrow, 2 minutes to 5. When this was mooted, our listeners, a lot of them said much the same thing. Bring on the GST, it'll still be cheaper than, supporting local retail. There's quite a cynical reaction to some of it. Yeah. Before we go, the prospect of a name change for Massey University, however unlikely you might think, is being debated by staff and students today. The Human Rights Commission now involved, saying use of the name should be re-examined. Quote, William Massey's racist statements are still offensive many years later. It is up to the communities and people of Massey University to talk and decide whether his name should remain at the helm of their learning institution. What do you think?
I think it's political correctness gone mad.
Yes.
This man lived 100 years ago. Yeah. I didn't even know the university was named after him. I do now. Doesn't make any difference to me.
It's idiotic, isn't it, really, if you think of all the problems that's going to cause. You're going to change the name of a huge institution dealing with hundreds of thousands of people. It's just pathetically stupid.
Brian Edwards and Michelle Bogue have
We agree. We started agreeing and we finished agreeing.
What a moment.
I know.
No.
Unique.
Can't celebrate it any longer, though. We've got to go.
It's good because he's lost his memory.
I've lost what?
Guy Espiner on Checkpoint tonight. Thanks, everybody. Have a lovely weekend.
Welcome to Checkpoint. I'm Guy Espiner. Tonight on the programme, guilty as charged. Colin Craig is found to have defamed Jordan Williams and he'll pay the price, more than $1.2 million in damages. Police vow a crackdown as they reveal they too have been hit by laser strikes. Pop-up homes for more than 250 homeless Aucklanders, but there's a catch. We'll speak to the Social Housing Minister, Paula Bennett, about that. And when backyard cricket isn't enough, we speak to a man who's built his entire cricket ground.
RNZ News at 5. Good afternoon. I'm Anna Thomas. The founder of the Taxpayers Union, Jordan Williams, has won his defamation case against the former Conservative Party leader Colin Craig. A jury in the High Court in Auckland this afternoon awarded Mr Williams $1.27 million in damages. Reporter Sarah Robson has been covering the case.
The jury of 6 men and 5 women delivered its unanimous verdict after close to 10 hours of deliberations. The jurors found Mr Craig did defame Mr Williams in comments made at a news conference and in a leaflet distributed to 1.6 million households throughout the country in July last year. Outside court, Jordan Williams said he was pleased with the decision. He said Mr Craig's false accusations and public threats to sue him could not go unanswered. Mr Craig's lawyers have indicated they will be seeking leave to set aside the verdict and the amount of damages awarded. From the High Court in Auckland, Sarah Robson, aho.
And Colin Craig says the decision was not what he expected, and he's saying little more at the moment.
Because obviously there's still legal steps in place. So I'll restrict my comment to very, very surprised and disappointed, and obviously we'll just say more as this unfolds.
The lawyer for 26 Indonesian fishermen fighting for up to $6 million in unpaid wages while working in New Zealand waters says the men had to put up their homes as collateral to get the jobs. The High Court has ruled the South Korean corporation Sajo Oyang should sell 2 of its trawlers to compensate the men, but the company is taking the case to the Court of Appeal in 2 weeks. The trawlers were forfeited in 2012 and 2014 after Sajo Oyang was convicted of fisheries crimes. The company says the boats should be returned and the men have no right to claim relief from them. The lawyer for the men, Karen Harding, says they wanted to work in New Zealand because they thought it was a safe place.
They put up their mother's houses and the paddy fields as security for the job. One person put up, all he had was his graduation certificate from primary school. And if they had have walked off the vessel in port, they would have lost their mother's lands and paddy fields and rendered their families homeless.
The Civil Aviation Authority is warning planes being targeted by laser pointers could have catastrophic consequences. The police are investigating a spate of laser strikes on aircraft in Auckland and Wellington overnight. The authority says landing and takeoffs are critical phases, and if pilots are blinded or distracted, the consequences could be dire. It says the number of strikes has risen from 1 to 2 each year in the early 2000s to more than 100 each year since 2011. The Criminal Bar Association says a retired judge's criticism of a Wellington rugby player's discharge without conviction on assault charges is unfortunate. The District Court discharged Losi Filippo for assaulting 4 people on the grounds a conviction would jeopardise his rugby career. The Solicitor General has now given the police permission to take an appeal against that decision to the High Court. A former District Court Judge, Roy Wade, has said while a sentence starting point of 18 months jail was correct, Judge Bruce Davidson's assessment that the consequences of a conviction would be out of all proportion was not. However, the Criminal Bar Association's Vice President, Len Anderson, says there are good reasons for the law to allow discharge without conviction, and each case is a very fact-specific case.
A judge has a duty to consider all of the legislation, and if a judge was to say no, in this case I'm not going to consider whether there could be a discharge without conviction, then in my view that would be appealable immediately because the judge hasn't fulfilled their duty.
And Len Anderson of the Criminal Bar Association. A public outcry followed Filippo's discharge, and his playing contract with the Wellington Lions was terminated last week. It's 5:04. An unarmed black man has been shot dead by the police in California after he pointed what turned out to be an electronic cigarette at officers. The police in San Diego say after receiving emergency calls about a mentally distressed man, the officers found Alfred Orlango walking through a mall. They killed him when he took up a shooting stance and pointed an object at them. The 38-year-old's mother says her son was distraught because his best friend had died, and the officers who confronted him should have helped him instead. To sport now, and New Zealand have gone into the second cricket test against India without their best batsman and skipper Kane Williamson. Williamson has a virus and withdrew shortly before the match, which has just begun in Kolkata. The former captain Ross Taylor is leading the side with Henry Nicholls replacing Williamson in the batting lineup. The only other change to the playing 11 sees Jitan Patel replace the injured off-spinner Mark Craig. India has won the toss and elected to bat. The Silver Ferns have been dealt a blow ahead of the Constellation Cup netball series against Australia, with defender and mid-quarter Kayla Cullen ruled out with a foot injury. Mid-quarter Gina Crampton has been called into the squad. The All Black lock, Patrick Tuvalu, admits to having a few jitters ahead of Sunday's Rugby Championship showdown with Argentina in Buenos Aires. And Tuvalu has been promoted to a partner, Brodie Retallick, at lock, and what will be his 10th test.
I'm pretty nervous. More excitement as well. Getting my second start for the All Blacks, and I've spent a long time off rugby. I'm off my hips and surgery, but have a good year of Super Rugby and a couple of games of Mitre 10 as well. I feel I'm ready.
Patrick Tuvalu. A fan who heckled European Ryder Cup duo Rory McIlroy and Andy Sullivan when they failed to make a putt in practice has won a $100 bet. Challenged to show he could do better, David Johnson rolled in the 4-metre putt before setting off on an extravagant round of fist pumps and high fives. And that's the news.
Tonight on Night's Kay Finlayson, having a dog day afternoon and evening at the National Dog Show in Christchurch. Country Life is wind farming near Wellington. The team also inspects some Brahman cattle designed for the heat, the perfect beast for a changing climate. And because we are right in the thick of school holidays, we are dedicating the Sonic Tonic to toys on nights for children of all ages, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
And now the Met Service weather to midnight tomorrow: Northland, Auckland, Coromandel Peninsula and Bay of Plenty. Cloudy periods, a few showers, more frequent about Auckland for a time today. Waikato to Whanganui, including Taumaranui, Taupo and Taihape. Scattered showers, some heavy inland during the afternoons and evenings. Isolated thunderstorms from Whanganui and Taihape northwards until tonight. From Manawatu to Wellington, also widened up a fine and cloudy periods and a few showers. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, a few showers, mostly about the ranges. Fine spells increasing tomorrow. Marlborough Sounds, Nelson, Buller, Westland and Fiordland. Scattered showers, possibly heavy inland this afternoon and evening. And remainder of Marlborough, Canterbury, Otago and Southland. Scattered showers this afternoon and evening. Some heavy inland and possibly thundery from Canterbury southwards. A few showers returning to Marlborough, Eastern Otago and Southland tomorrow. And for the Chatham Islands, mostly cloudy, occasional rain tomorrow. It is 5:07 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thanks, Anna. And first tonight on Checkpoint, the Colin Craig defamation trial. Well, he may just have lost the largest defamation case in New Zealand history, but Colin Craig says he has no regrets about his actions and he would do it all again. The former Conservative Party leader was found this afternoon to have defamed the lawyer Jordan Williams by a High Court jury, which also determined that Mr Craig should fork out more than $1.2 million in damages. Mr Williams successfully claimed that Mr Craig had defamed him in a pamphlet delivered to 1.6 million household, in which he accused Mr Williams of a smear campaign to oust him from the Conservative Party leadership. In the pamphlet and in media interviews, Mr Craig claimed that Mr Williams had spread false allegations about his relationship with his former Press Secretary Rachel McGregor. Now, just before 3 o'clock this afternoon, the jury at the Auckland High Court sided with Mr Williams. But Mr Craig has told Checkpoint he has no regrets about sending out the leaflet. I spoke to Colin Craig just a few minutes ago.
Look, a very surprising outcome and obviously pretty disappointed with it. Yeah, I mean, obviously you have better days than this.
Why were you surprised?
Well, look, I mean, I wasn't a verdict I was expecting, nor were many others, but you know, we just have to take that as the first step, and we'll just obviously legally we'll take the next step that's necessary in the case. But yeah, it was surprising, and I mean that's about it. I mean, you know, it wasn't something I was expecting, nor was anyone else. So surprising outcome, disappointing of course, but then we just have to move on and take the next legal step in the case.
And is that next legal step an appeal?
No, my understanding is because the judgment's been reserved by the judge, it's up to the judge to consider what happens now. Depending on where she decides to go with it, then there may be an appeal. But that's another step down the track, which hasn't been decided, and I'm happy to update if and when we reach that point.
What is your instinct, Mr. Craig? Do you feel that you need to appeal this ruling?
Oh, look, I don't think it was a ruling I was expecting, Guy. So, yeah, I think you can take it for granted that if we reach a point where the judgment is entered, we will have to seriously look at an appeal, and it's pretty likely. But that's premature to say anything definite. This is something the legal team will work on if and when we get to that point.
What about the damages awarded? This was a big, big sum, more than $1.2 million. What was your reaction to that?
Well, look, as I've already said, it was totally unexpected. And I guess there'll be plenty of experts who wade in and offer their opinion as to how this could have happened. But from my perspective, as I say, totally surprising, was unexpected. I sat through the trial for 4 weeks and I didn't see it coming, and neither did pretty much anyone else. So I think we just have to take this one step at a time, and the next step is for the judge to give it consideration. Once she's finished doing that, we know where we are.
As you say, this was a trial that went on for weeks, many witnesses called, a lot of sensitive information was brought up during this trial. What sort of toll has it taken on you personally?
Well, I mean, that's an interesting question because at the moment, it's not long after the verdict, which, as I say, the judge has reserved the judgment for the moment. You're talking with lawyers initially. It's all a bit surreal in the first moment, especially when it's not something that you're expecting. So in terms of the toll for me, it's a lot of time away from family. It's a lot of time away from my work. But, it's probably going to get a more comprehensive and coherent answer from me about a week from now when I actually really have sat down and worked out exactly the toll that it's taken. But it's a long process, court cases, and this was a particularly challenging one. So I think you can probably take it for granted I'm going to be sleeping a lot this weekend.
When you look back, Mr. Craig, do you now regret sending out that pamphlet to 1.6 million homes?
No, I don't. I came under attack. I responded to that attack. I thought I was entitled to do that. That's a matter the court is still ultimately going to have to make a final decision on at some point. But I don't regret doing it. Obviously, depending on where we end up, the consequences of that may be terminal. But look, we just have to. You make your best call that you are, and I still have a view that, and it's a strongly held view, and it hasn't changed, that dirty politics isn't acceptable in New Zealand, and it shouldn't be a practice that's condoned, and it should be a practice people call into question. So if you're asking me about my opinions on this subject, they are unchanged. I still don't think it's the right thing. I still don't think people should do it. But obviously, in terms of this particular case, we'll just have to see where things end up at the end of it, because at the moment, obviously, it's a very surprising outcome.
That is the former Conservative Party leader, Colin Craig. Well, Peter McKnight acted for Jordan Williams, and he joins us now. Good evening to you, Peter McKnight. You would have been listening to that from Colin Craig.
Very interesting.
Yeah, what is your reaction to that?
Well, I mean, it's just going on and on and on. So just repeating and causing more hurt to Jordan by making these sort of statements and defaming him again, but there it is. That's what he wants to do.
He says he has no regrets about sending out the leaflet.
Which is extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary. Obviously, a jury of 11 thought very differently, and they heard for actually I think it was 4 days, that, and I cross-examined Mr. Craig for 3 of those days, and they listened to him very carefully. They listened to Jordan Williams and his witnesses. They listened to Rachel McGregor, and who unfortunately had to come into the whole matter, but there she was. and they made their decision. So it was really came down to an issue of credibility. Who do you believe? And they've spoken, and they've made an award. So a lot of that, of course, is a part of those damages is marking their concern about the way the case was conducted, the way the defences were put forward. Everything that was done was just fight, fight, fight. There wasn't an inch given anywhere.
Was there a point that you felt you had the jury on your side?
You never know, because they keep a very, very steady faces. You just don't know. They don't react, which is very good. But I felt the turning point in the case was when the former chairman of the Conservative Party made certain statements under cross-examination. And from that day, I thought this case has really changed. And the other point was the recalling of Jordan last Friday, I thought was a low point in the case. But those are just my views.
Okay, the payout...
Of course, I'm biased.
Of course. The payout itself, $1.27 million in terms of the damages. Can you set it in context for us? There's been some talk that this is the largest payout in New Zealand defamation history.
Yeah, I think it is actually. And then there'll be a very interesting issue of costs, because they will be enormous. And we'll be seeking full costs. And we'll just see what happens in that regard. That's a matter for the judge. I must just say the judge was absolutely superb.
Before we move on to the judge, I just want to clarify that if we can. In legal terms, what are enormous costs?
Well, I just don't know. I haven't sat down and calculated them, but they could be somewhere between 500,000 and $1 million. So when you fight a case like this and you lose, and you take every point, that really ups the costs that are involved. There's just hours and hours spent. The actual courtroom scene is only the tip of the iceberg, and Ali Romanos and I, and we have worked 18 hours a day for the last four weeks, so it's just extraordinary the amount of effort that goes into it.
So is it possible that Colin Craig would have to pay another $500,000 on top of the $1.2 million?
I would think so, at least that. So, but that's a matter for the judge, and I don't think we should really comment on that. But I really do want to go back to the judge, just the way she dealt with all matters, including the way she treated the jury. Everybody in the court, I thought, was just absolutely marvellous. Okay. And she's a genius, that woman.
Okay, just a couple of points I do want to raise with you before you go. Jordan Williams, this is a lot of money. Is there any consideration, perhaps, of donating some of it to charity, or what is going to happen with the money?
Well, I don't know. That's all for him, and he's really been constantly concerned about Rachel. Her being dragged into this, and this will all become more obvious next week, and I can't talk about that, but just the whole thing to do with Rachel and why she had to be dragged into the case, all this sort of thing. And his concern right from the start was, how do we look after Rachel? So that's really the point.
Cameron Slater was talking outside the court this evening as well, talking about taking similar action.
Well, he has got similar action. Colin Craig is suing him for $650,000. Colin Craig is suing another person for $1.1 million, John Stringer, a very fine man. And he's also suing a grandmother for $250,000. So... And in the past, of course, he's sued people left, right and centre. Well, no, he hasn't sued them, but he's threatened to and on one occasion sued Russell Norman. So he just goes on and on and on.
Any advice?
And if he starts talking like he did on the radio tonight,
yes,
he will just get further proceedings, because he can't go on defaming Jordan. You just can't do it.
I was going to ask you if you had any advice for him. I think you've just given it.
Yes, well, he better talk to his lawyers before he speaks to the media in the way he just did, because I find that extremely concerning.
Thank you very much for your time, Peter McKnight. He was the lead lawyer for Jordan Williams in that case. It's 19 minutes past 5. You're listening to Checkpoint with Guy and Espiner. A Christchurch resident says that she's lost faith in the police after her home was burgled 2 times in just 7 weeks. The comments come as new figures show that the number of burglaries remains stubbornly high. Here's Colin Young.
Alana George's Christchurch home was first burgled in July when thieves stole an Xbox, a PlayStation and a video camera. 7 weeks later, they were back.
So they took my son's new camera, which he'd had maybe less than 2 weeks. So, I mean, he was absolutely gutted because he's so into making his wee sort of short movies and stuff. And this time they took all of my jewellery.
Alana George says the police failed to follow up with her when she told them the stolen PlayStation was for sale on TradeMe, or when she asked whether the fingerprints from the 2 burglaries were from the same person.
It sort of, as I said, made me sort of lose faith in the police a little bit. I mean, surely they could have non-sworn officers that could just send out some information or just contact people to let them know what's actually happening with their burglary.
The second burglary of Alana George's home was one of 6,500 that happened in August, with burglaries up 15% over the past year. The Police Minister, Judith Collins, says it's too soon to say what impact a new police policy to attend 100% of burglaries is having on reducing crime. But she's confident they have the officers required to do the job.
They have not come to that decision lightly, and they've obviously made that decision knowing exactly what the resourcing is. So I don't believe for a moment they won't be able to meet the goals that they've set themselves.
Labour's police spokesperson Stuart Nash says while burglaries are worthy of police attention, a lack of police on the beat means there's a risk the renewed focus might come at the expense of investigating violent crime. He points to a 15% increase in robberies and other related crimes in the year to August and an 8% rise in assaults over the same period.
In the last year, there's nearly 50,000 assaults. That's serious. There's nearly 5,500 sexual assaults. So sure, burglaries are important, but you need to look at the whole picture and we'll ask the question, is our police force sufficiently resourced to meet the expectations of our communities, which is solving all crime, not just burglaries?
Stuart Nash questions Ms Collins's commitment to reducing crime, given there's no plan to increase police numbers over the next 4 years.
And what we've got is an incredibly dedicated police force, but is just under the pump. In their latest workplace survey, 55% of them said they had too much work-related stress, and 60% said they're not meeting the promises they make to the public. Crime is increasing, and the numbers of police on the ground simply aren't.
Judith Collins says the rise in violent crime could be to do with an increase in the reporting of it, rather than an increase in actual crimes.
These are Tier 1 statistics. They are basically Statistics New Zealand taking the raw data from police. So what it doesn't do, it doesn't drill down into exactly what this all means. But I think it is clear that there is an increase in reporting of family violence, and that's probably a better thing than not reporting it.
Despite her belief the police are adequately resourced at the moment, Judith Collins says she's asked Cabinet to allow more officers to be recruited. She says a decision on this has yet to be made. For Checkpoint, ko Colin Young tēnei.
23 minutes past 5, you're listening to Checkpoint with me, Guy and Espina. Coming up, we count down to a comet crash and why there's no such thing as a free pop-up house. Even if you're homeless, we'll be speaking to the Social Housing Minister, Paula Bennett. We'd love to hear your views on the stories we're covering this evening. You can text us on 2101. You can reach us on Twitter at Checkpoint RNZ. You can Facebook us, Checkpoint with John Campbell, or email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. Of course, you can also watch us online at our website, rnz.co.nz/checkpoint, or on Freeview, Channel 50. Let's head to America now and to New York, where a commuter train ploughed into a station in New Jersey at the height of morning rush hour. It killed one person and left more than 100 people injured. The crash at the Hoboken terminal brought down part of the roof. It scattered debris right over the concourse there, created chaos at one of the busiest transit hubs in the New York City area. Here's Alex Ashton.
Scenes of devastation inside the Hoboken train station. Witnesses described their terror as the front of the train smashed through the track stop at high speed and into the terminal, toppling support columns and creating chaos. A New Jersey transit employee saw the crowded train approaching at high speed before it smashed into a wall.
I heard just an initial bomb sound. I knew it wasn't a bomb because I saw it happen, but it was just initially just a horrendous exploding noise and concrete dust, electrical wires, and a train flying into the depot. Just kind of couldn't believe what I was seeing.
The crash brought down part of the roof and sent debris flying. Passengers kicked out windows and crawled out amid crying and screaming. The injured were carried on stretchers to waiting ambulances, while survivors recounted their stories.
And one of the young ladies that had got thrown from that area, her legs got stuck in the middle of the doorway, but we managed to pull her out before the actual, the last of the impact happened, and so she was fine and she was just shaking.
Emergency services swarmed to the scene.
We heard 100 plus injuries.
That's correct.
More than 100.
100 plus, correct.
Are all of them on the train?
I can't give you that information right now.
Many of them critical?
Many critical, yes.
One woman died when she was struck by debris on the platform. The train driver was seriously injured and taken to hospital, where he was cooperating with investigators. The cause of the crash is still unknown. But the New Jersey Governor Chris Christie told a news conference there were no signs it was anything other than an accident.
We have nothing really to add to that. The one thing, as Governor Cuomo mentioned, that we know is that the train came in at much too high a rate of speed. And the question is, why is that? And we won't know that for some time. As soon as we know, you can be sure we'll share it with the public.
New York's Governor Andrew Cuomo says it was obvious the train had come into the station at too high a rate of speed, but that it was unclear why.
There's no real point as to speculating what happened. Why did the train come in so fast? Was there a medical condition? What happened with the conductor, etc.? We have no idea.
Out on the campaign trail, Democratic presidential candidate and former New York Senator Hillary Clinton said she was terribly upset to hear the news.
To me, I live in New York. People commute into New York from New Jersey.
As investigators search for clues about the accident, some are already saying it could have been prevented. New Jersey Transit had been ordered by the government to install a safety system that automatically slows or stops trains going too fast. But the project hasn't been completed after repeated delays. For Checkpoint, Alex Ashton.
27 minutes past 5 back home now. Police are investigating a spate of dangerous laser strike attacks on aircraft overnight. Pilots on an Air New Zealand flight landing in Wellington were blinded by a laser beam and were left with headaches after an attack last night. Then in Auckland, several international flights reported similar strikes early this morning, and a helicopter was also targeted. The Civil Aviation Authority says despite stricter rules, lasers are still easy for people to get their hands on. Here's Sally Murphy.
The Civil Aviation Authority says there have been 108 laser strikes so far this year, more than the whole of last year. The Airline Pilots Association President Tim Robinson says a pilot being blinded by a laser could have catastrophic consequences.
It can create confusion in the flight deck. It is a huge safety issue, obviously, for pilots. When we're relying very much on our sight, especially in the final stages of approach to come into land airport, and we are illuminated by a laser, it can have a huge effect on our ability to carry out the flight and the safety of the flight.
Mr Robinson says there should be stricter penalties for the offence.
Our biggest concern is there is a lack of public awareness as to how serious this offence is. And also I think we need an education process amongst our judiciary when they're sentencing offenders as to how serious this issue is and how much of a critical flight safety problem it is.
The Civil Aviation Authority's Deputy Director for Air Transport, Mark Hughes, says pilots can be blinded for minutes at a time when struck by a laser.
There have been a few cases of lasting effects globally on pilots that have suffered a laser strike. I think the risk of that is increasing as the power of these devices get stronger. I think that potential is only going to increase.
Laser pointers are not banned in New Zealand, but in 2013 the government introduced regulations restricting the importation, sale and acquisition of lasers with an output of more than 1 milliwatt. Between March 2014 and February this year, Customs seized 928 high-powered laser pointers, which have all been destroyed. Mr Hughes says they're still in the hands of the wrong people.
Despite the ban that we have for import and for having them in your possession, they're still available through the internet and so forth. So people do have them, and unfortunately they're using them in ways that are negative and impacting safety.
The police say they are investigating the latest attacks, and anyone caught could face charges of endangering transport or criminal nuisance. And their own officers are not immune. The Eagle helicopter has had 10 major strikes in the past year, including last week when it was hit over Otahuhu. For Checkpoint, Sally Murphy.
5:30, the Rosetta spacecraft is about to end its mission in pretty spectacular fashion by smashing itself into the comet that it's been tracking for the past 2 years. The space probe took 10 years to reach Comet 67P, a 4-kilometre wide ball of ice and dust between the orbits of Jupiter and Mars. It sent back tens of thousands of images over that time, but scientists say the best may yet still be to come as Rosetta heads towards its doom just before midnight tonight. The BBC's Jonathan Amos is at Mission Control in Germany.
For 25 months, Rosetta's been circling Comet 67P as it swept through the inner solar system. The probe's taken more than 100,000 images and other readings to gain unprecedented insight into the workings of this huge icy wanderer. It even dropped a small robot onto the surface of the duck-shaped comet. But with 67P now heading away from the sun, there's precious little solar power to operate Rosetta's systems, and scientists are determined to go out in style. As the probe heads towards its destructive finale, it'll train its cameras on some deep sinkholes to try to see inside the comet, to glimpse the individual blocks of ice that stuck together to make the object when the solar system was forming 4.5 billion years ago. Rosetta's project scientist Matt Taylor says the mission's final moments should be spectacular.
We're taking dust measurements, gas measurements, plasma measurements, and imaging the surface, probing these pits to see what we can see in the sidewalls to get the highest resolution measurements, which are unique, and that was why we chose to do all of this. And we're doing it just before we can't do anything anymore. So we've really left it to the last minute to do the best, coolest thing.
The impact speed will be relatively gentle, under a metre per second. Even so, Rosetta will suffer significant damage. Its systems have also been rigged to shut down on contact, severing all communication with Earth.
Good evening, you with Checkpoint still to come tonight. Paula Bennett on pop-up housing for Aucklanders. And a grandfather who cut free a family trapped in a burning car is one of those recognised with a Bravery Award. Now with the headlines, here's Anna Thomas.
The former Conservative Party leader Colin Craig says he has no regrets about sending out the leaflet that a jury has found defamed Jordan Williams of the Taxpayers Union. He told Checkpoint the verdict was surprising, totally unexpected and disappointing. He says an appeal is very likely if the judge does not set aside the verdict and the $1.27 million award. The lawyer for Mr Williams, Peter McKnight, says Mr Craig's lack of regret is extraordinary and his comments today are extremely concerning and could be further defaming to Mr Williams. The lawyer for 26 Indonesian fishermen fighting for up to $6 million in unpaid wages while working in New Zealand waters says the men had to put up their homes as collateral to get the jobs. The High Court has ruled the South Korean corporation Sajo Oyang should sell 2 of its trawlers to compensate the men, but the company is taking the case to the Court of Appeal in 2 weeks. New figures show the number of burglaries remains stubbornly high, with a 15% increase nationwide in the year to August. The Police Minister Judith Collins says it's too soon to say what impact a new police policy to attend all burglaries is having on reducing crime. The Crown says 2 cousins have blamed each other for a road rage incident that left their victim with an amputated leg. Martin and Trevor Sangyom appeared at the High Court in Auckland this morning, where Justice Woodhouse jailed them for 4 years, 8 months and 2 years, 1 month, respectively. Justice Woodhouse said Trevor Sangyum beat the victim with a tyre iron before Martin Sangyum ran him over in June last year. The Civil Aviation Authority is warning planes being targeted by laser pointers could have catastrophic consequences. The police are investigating a spate of laser strikes on aircraft in Auckland and Wellington overnight. And those are the headlines. I'll be back at 6 o'clock.
Thanks very much, Anna. Let's turn now to the business news. Nona Peltier is with us. Good afternoon, good evening to you, Nona.
Yeah.
Figures on the building consents. They dropped, but on an annual basis, it's the highest for more than a decade. So what are these numbers telling us?
Well, it turns out that I guess it's a story about Auckland, a lot of development going on here. And so it's helped lift those numbers. And so this is not a surprise, really, because we would have expected by now to get some of these building consents. And over the last few months, it's been a bit patchy. We haven't really seen that coming through. But now suddenly we're seeing that. And it's not normal for this time of year to see such a high rate of growth. So on an annual basis, the number of consents was up 14% in August over the year earlier. And that's that's the strongest growth since 2005. So finally, I think we're starting to see some of these properties that we've been waiting for to come through. Is it enough? Probably not.
Well, business confidence too. People seeming quite upbeat, but not always about their own prospect. What's happening there?
Well, now it's interesting. So the business outlook for September was a net 28% of firms are optimistic about the year ahead. That's quite strong. And it's up 12 points on the previous month, so it's actually picking up steam. And why? Well, it's their own prospects are still quite strong. They're strong when it comes to employment and profit, and investment intentions have eased a little bit, but then maybe that could be because some of these people are property investors, who knows.
And what about the markets? A little bit more of a negative tone there.
Well, everywhere but in New Zealand. It turns out the New Zealand market's done very well today, and possibly because of the very strong consent numbers that we've had and the business confidence being up. Yeah. But otherwise, not so good. And it's partly because of, the market's really turned negative overnight because of some testimony from the chief executive of Wells Fargo, plus some negative news about Deutsche Bank out of Europe. The market really doesn't like the financial sector doing bad things.
Deutsche Bank facing a huge fine. Was it 14 billion or something?
I know, $14 billion. And it goes back to what happened in just before the global financial crisis in 2008. So it was also leading up to that. The U.S. Justice Department has finally kind of caught up with Deutsche Bank, gave them a mighty large fine. Deutsche says they're not going to pay it. Meanwhile, though, they're selling off profitable assets, cutting staff, doing all sorts of things. Okay, the market doesn't like that. But they also really didn't like the testimony from the chief executive of Wells Fargo. The U.S. Congress basically called them a criminal enterprise, much like Enron, and so it's not very nice thing. So really bad news. Okay,
it's going to be a rough weekend.
Yeah, no kidding. But nevertheless, this is the end of the third quarter, and our market ended up 10% over the 3 months. Same with Asia, also 9.5% up, still very strong growth over the 3 months. Today, our market finished up 0.25%, up 18 points to 7,361. Our New Zealand dollar was also quite strong. Now, there's no particular reason for that. It's just a technical thing. Once it hits a certain number, it just kind of jumps a little bit more ahead. And so we are trading at 72.6 US cents, 95.2 Australian, and 56 British pence. So very strong. Yeah, good way to end the month for the local market.
Bit of Kiwi too, yeah. Thanks very much, Nona. Have a good weekend. Thank you for that. It's, 22 minutes to 6 on Checkpoint. Pop-up housing for up to 250 homeless Aucklanders will be available from February. But there's a catch, it won't come for free. The Social Housing Minister, Paula Bennett, announced today that land that was earmarked for a school will be used to site transitional houses for the next few years. But the tenants, who are mainly on benefits, will have to pay up to a quarter of their incomes to rent the homes. I spoke to the Social Housing Minister, Paula Bennett, earlier this afternoon.
About 250, including children, we think, at any one time. And we'll be housing them for anywhere between 12 and 24 weeks before we move them into more permanent housing. So this is what we're calling transitional housing.
So when did you determine that this was the way to go? Because you've only just asked for resource consent, I understand.
Yeah, look, we've been working on the modular policy for quite some time, so I've been talking about that since very early this year. I've had the 3 sites that I've been working on. Then we've been really actively looking for sites that suit us. So either they are Crown-owned, They've been earmarked for a future development like a school or a road, if it's under transport, of course, or some of our DHBs hold land that they think they'll need for future use. So we've been looking at land like that. Then what's been important to us is that it's flat, so easy to build on. It's already residentially zoned, and we're able to get consents relatively easily.
So you're pretty sure that there will be no issue with the consent, because obviously you haven't got sign-off quite for that yet.
Yeah, we're very confident that this has got, sort of everything stacks up. The only other thing is around any contaminations in the land, which we have done a geotech on it, but until we get actually digging, you don't know. But apart from that, it's looking to us like it should be all go.
And are these traditionally built houses?
Yes, so I call them fast stick builds, which is a bit of my own language in there. So ultimately they are... So the walls are kind of pre-made off-site, and they put them together on-site. So they're kind of the kit sets. There's a number of suppliers that do it that are well known in the market. They're just going through some of the finals on that, and then they're ready to go.
Do the people pay to live here?
They will just pay part of their income, 25% of their income in general, wherever possible. Yeah.
Okay, so I presume many of these people would be on benefits, really, wouldn't they? I guess not all of them, but...
Most of them. I mean, in general, I think it's something like 70% of those that are in social houses are on welfare, so you would think it would be around the same, if not higher.
So they would pay 25% of their benefit, would they, to live in these transitional homes?
That's the kind of ideas we've got at the moment. We've certainly budgeted to pay the market rent and for the tenant to be paying a portion. However, we have done deals in other areas like this where we've got them in transitionally, where we've instead used their 25% to help them pay off debt, which we're kind of open to in some situations. I mean, I really see this housing as a way to stabilise some families, help them get rid of some of the debt or something that's holding them back while we look for that more permanent home for them.
And they could stay for a maximum of, half a year effectively?
Yeah, I sort of don't want to turn this into a permanent site because it's not permanent. I'm quite open that we will be relocating these houses in a few years' time. So we are going to use it as that. We sort of think 6 months is the maximum.
But presumably you wouldn't turf someone out, to use rough language, without them having another place to go to. The
whole purpose is to have somewhere else to live. Mm-hmm. So an example is in Christchurch, we've got a motel here that we lease that's effectively got self-contained units on it, and we have put a community housing provider in. So we'll be doing the same with this site. They can stay, I think it's up to 16 weeks in the motel in Christchurch, and on average they stay 8 weeks. So we're saying anywhere between 12 and 24 weeks for this one in Auckland. There's always a degree of flexibility because permanent housing is our aim and our goal.
Yeah. Just finally, I see you haven't actually launched the consultation yet with, nearby residents or the local community. Was there a sense that this was a little bit rushed? You've only just put the consent in, you haven't done the consultation. I'm just wondering why you announced it today.
I could have announced it any time, but because the consent's gone in, I sort of think word gets around pretty quickly with that. It's light industrial. I'm not expecting any problems with this whatsoever.
You're not expecting others to kick up about it?
But I can tell you I'll be making a lot more announcements, and then this is part of my program. I'm working on the emergency, transitional and the permanent build, which is our main focus. But I have got things moving all the time, and I expect to make a lot more announcements in this area.
That's the Social Housing Minister, Paula Bennett. It's 17 minutes to 6. You're listening to Checkpoint. A grandfather who cut free a family trapped in a burning car, and a teenager who raced into the ocean in the dark to save a drowning man. These were among the recipients of the Royal Humane Society Awards for Bravery, presented at Government House in Wellington today. Adriana Webber was there to hear their stories.
It was July the 11th, 2015, when retiree Murray Mitchie and his wife travelled along State Highway 3 to meet their son and grandchildren for afternoon tea near Bulls. He spotted a car crash and then the upturned wreck of a horse float in an SUV from which flames were rising. Mr Mitchie jumped a fence, ran down a steep bank towards the wreck. He helped free the 3 young girls one by one, but some of their seatbelts became jammed.
Well, when I couldn't cut the seatbelts, I was getting a bit worried. So and I yelled out to some person up on the bank to get me a knife or any instrument that would cut the seatbelts, and he'd come back and threw me the knife, and I was able to do the job to release them from the seatbelts.
Finally, he was able to cut the unconscious mother free, and with the help of 4 strangers, Anthony Duffy, Jamie Yalden, Stacey Watt and Kate Elliott, took her to safety. They were only about 3 metres from the vehicle when it exploded. Mr. Mitchie said he just sprang into action.
I don't really know what was running through my head. My aim was just to get the people out of the car and get them to a safe site, knowing the car was going to blow up. It was a fair blaze, and so there was only a short space of time to get them out, and that was my achievement.
Also honoured were 3 people, Paige Olds, Jonathan Derrick and Logan Mason, who rescued a drowning man near Eastbourne in Lower Hutt in March last year. Paige, then just 16, was the first to jump into the water to help, despite, like the others, not being a very confident swimmer. About 70 metres from the shore, she found the man unconscious and floating face down in the water, turned him over but struggled with the weight of him.
It was at that moment I really thought that I wasn't going to be able to, and I knew that John and Logan weren't too keen on swimming. So I was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Like, how am I going to get back in with this man? And that was probably, the scariest part.
She called out to the others, who then came to help, and the 3 of them took the man to shore. Logan Mason says when they finally got on solid ground, everything was a blur.
It was just, a big hit of adrenaline, try and do your best, try and save a life. Everything's all blurry, and, you're just yelling at other people, ring an ambulance, and yeah.
The man died in hospital 3 days later. Mr. Mason says despite the sad outcome, he was pleased that they were able to give the man a fighting chance, and if he could go back in time, he wouldn't hesitate to help again. For Checkpoint, Adriana Webber.
14 minutes to 6 now. Well, it started with a flash of lights and ended in a vicious road rage attack that saw the victim beaten with a tyre iron and run down, causing him to lose his leg. Martin Sang-yum was jailed for 4 years and 8 months, and his cousin Trevor Sang-yum for 2 years and 1 month when they appeared at the Auckland High Court this morning. Auckland Court reporter Edward Gay filed this report.
Justice Woodhouse said Martin and Trevor Sang-yum were driving through Manurewa in June last year when the BMW behind them flashed its lights before passing them. The cousins tailgated the BMW despite the driver trying to shake them off. When the victim tried to do a U-turn and drive off, the cousins blocked his lane, forcing him to stop. Justice Woodhouse said the victim got out of his car and told the men he didn't want any trouble, but 23-year-old Trevor Sang-yum went to the boot and got a tyre iron.
Trevor Sang-yum, you came round the open driver's door and kicked the victim in the body. The victim then tried to get into the driver's seat of his car. He was pulled from the car and punched in the head and stomach. He was then struck in the head with the tyre iron. The 2 of you and the victim then moved away from the car, with the victim being punched and struck with the tyre iron a number of times about the head and body. He was also put into a headlock.
The judge said eventually the 3 broke apart before Martin Sang-yum got into the victim's BMW and drove at the victim.
The victim shouted, "Come on mate, don't run over me," and began running. You continued driving towards him, hit him with the car, and then the car went through a wooden fence and crashed into a concrete block porch.
Justice Woodhouse said 24-year-old Martin Sang-yum drove off in the victim's car, followed by Trevor Sang-yum. The Crown Prosecutor Ben Smith said instead of calling emergency services, they left the victim on the road. They later rifled through the victim's car and sold his cell phone for $30. Martin Sang-yum kept the victim's jacket. Mr. Smith questioned the men's remorse, saying both pointed the finger at each other. Justice Woodhouse raised this point directly with Martin Sang-yum, who told him his remorse letter was genuine. The judge said the victim had to have his right leg amputated below the knee.
The victim's life has been very badly affected as the result of the loss of his leg. In addition, he has lost his job and he feels he has an uncertain future. He lives in constant pain and faces rehabilitation and medication, possibly for the rest of his life.
Martin Sang-yum's lawyer, Martin Hislop, said it appeared the cousins were intoxicated at the time and had used drugs, but he said he'd noticed a huge change in his client over the past year. Trevor Sangyam's lawyer Isaac Koya argued his client was eligible for home detention and that would enable him to keep his job. But Justice Woodhouse said the only appropriate sentence was jail.
There was serious violence involved in this, and it was violence committed by the two of you acting together which made it worse. Attacks to the head with a weapon are serious aggravating factors.
The judge took time off their sentences for remorse and their early guilty pleas. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi ko Edward Gaiaho.
10 minutes to 6 on Checkpoint. Joseph Parker's mother, Sala, gets nervous every time her son steps into the boxing ring, understandably. Now she'll have twice the nerves. Joe's younger brother, John, is set to make his professional boxing debut. After a 5-year hiatus from fighting, the 22-year-old will box in the undercard of brother Joseph's bout with the Russian Alexander Dimitrenko in Auckland on Saturday. And as Matt Chatterton found out, it was John and not Joseph who was touted as the next big thing in their amateur fighting days.
You could be mistaken for thinking that hard-hitting sound is Joseph Parker, but no, it's actually his little brother John. Both Parkers went through the amateur boxing ranks during their teenage years. John was even a national champion in the light and middleweight divisions. Instead of following his brother into the professional ranks, John gave the sport up. But after spending the last 2 years following Joseph's progression, the younger Parker's re-entering the ring. John says Joseph has been a big inspiration behind his return.
I guess just seeing my brother struggle through the trainings and remembering the times that we struggled together kind of made me want to go back to that time that we did everything together, but I was actually a part of it rather than just helping with it.
Growing up, John was considered the more talented Parker, but discipline let him down. Joseph says his younger brother was a thrill to watch as an amateur and expects much the same tomorrow night.
If I had to compare him to someone, it would be like a little Mike Tyson. He just went there for the kill. Then when the bell rang, it's just like he held his breath for 3 minutes and he would just throw all his punches, and then when the bell rang again, he would start breathing again. That's how exciting it was.
And as brothers do, the pair enjoyed a bit of play fighting during their teenage years, despite their parents' disapproval. But given Joseph is over half a foot taller and 2 years older, John learned quickly not to mess with his big brother.
I have never thrown a punch until one time that I just clipped him a little bit.
And then you ran.
And I ran away.
And then I couldn't chase him too fast.
There'll be no running tomorrow night though, when John lines up against 27-year-old Ratu Dawai from Christchurch before big brother Joe headlines the show in Manukau. For Checkpoint, ko Matt Chatterton Tine.
A global trade ban has been imposed on trade in the highly endangered pangolins, a scaly creature that is the world's most poached animal and most poached mammal. Deborah Lutterbick reports.
This is a pangolin, a scaly animal with the dubious distinction of being the world's most poached mammal. Africa is the main source of pangolin supply, while the demand comes from Asia. But no more. Now the UN is offering protection, prohibiting any cross-border movements in the animals or their body parts for commercial purposes. North American Regional Director of the International Fund for Animal Welfare, Jeff Locken.
Today, the countries of the world voted to move all 8 species of pangolin from Appendix 2 to Appendix 1. And what that means now is that they will have full global protections from international commercial trade. This species is being pummeled by unsustainable trade for their scales and for their meat. And now that these protections have been done for them, it's going to be a clear line that any trade in pangolins is illegal going forward.
Pangolin meat is prized as a delicacy in Asian economies like Vietnam, and their scales are used in traditional medicines. But now some relief for the shy and nearsighted creatures.
Deborah Lutterbeck reporting there. Well, we've all played a bit of backyard cricket in our day, haven't we? That this guy has taken it to truly the next level. A Manawatu farmer has fulfilled a lifelong dream by creating his very own full-sized, laser-levelled cricket ground behind his house. I spoke to Ben McKelvey a little bit earlier this afternoon. I began by asking him what on earth possessed him to do this.
I've always wanted to sort of do it, and I've always enjoyed working with grass and that sort of thing. sort of worked as a groundsman over in England with polo fields and things for a season over there, and I enjoyed it. So I sort of always wanted to do something here, and that was the idea. And it sort of it just got a little bit bigger than I'd sort of anticipated. I guess just started working on it, and it wasn't until I was halfway through that I actually realised what was involved in doing this, and it became became a lot of work.
Because you have built not just a cricket pitch, you have built a cricket field, a full-scale, proper-sized cricket field.
Yeah, that's right. So, yeah, I mean, it was reasonably flat ground anyway, so I had to level it, and I got a lot of help from the local contractors who very kindly lent me some of their gear to get it flat, and it sort of was a natural basin anyway, and it had an embankment, halfway around it, and it with a nice little curve in it, so it just was asking to be made into a cricket field, really.
So this would be, what, not quite the size of the MCG, but maybe a basin reserve or a...
It'd be a very small New Zealand ground. I think it's probably as wide as the McLean Park field, and perhaps even as long. So it would be about that size, I would imagine.
But you've got a proper clay batting block in the middle there, and the whole works.
Yeah. We use Martin clay, which is probably what a lot of the local pitchers around here use. As far as I know, I'm no professional, but that's what I've been told. Most of the club pitches are around here. Obviously, the international stuff is quite a bit more expensive.
Hey, that is a lot of mowing.
Yeah, I think at the moment I'm trying to keep it down to 2 times a week on the outfield, so it looks pretty scruffy. But the pitch is 3 times a week at the moment. It's just middle of spring, so we're growing pretty good. The embankment is twice a week. The surrounds around the outside, that's twice a week when I get the time.
Hey, it's just occurring to me, Ben, have you got a wife or a girlfriend?
I've got a partner, Gemma, yeah.
What does she think of this?
I think she likes it. She's not as into cricket as I am, obviously, but she puts up with me spending most nights out there playing around with it. So, yeah, pretty quite lucky.
So at the moment, this is your own sort of field of dreams. Are you going to get to host games, host matches on this park?
Yeah. Well, that's the plan. I mean, I'm part of a club in Palmerston North, Bloomfield, and they've been around for quite a while, just a one-team club, and I just thought that perhaps they would want to come out and play on it, and they seem pretty keen, a lot of them. So that's the idea, is perhaps we'll make that our home ground, and eventually, maybe in the next few years, start playing club matches out here once it's all ticked all the boxes and things.
Oh, do you have to get sign-off from someone, do you, to actually...
Well, yeah, I've talked to some of the guys at MCA, and yeah, I think they certainly need to come out and have a look to make sure it's up to standard. Can't really have people bowling balls down at batsmen on an uneven surface or anything like that, so it could all end in tears. But so they've indicated that they have to come out and have a look at a few post-season matches and just see how it plays and see where we get to. But they're very supportive. You
want to take the opportunity to invite any of your favourite cricketers to roll their arm over on this one?
Oh, they're all welcome. No, it's open to all. So yeah, no, it would be great if we got a few black caps down or something like that. That would be outstanding.
Awesome.
It's not really about that. It's just about just a local sort of a club thing, and get as many local people involved as we can. That's what it's about, really, for me. And I guess if they don't really take up on it, then I guess I'll just have a really nice lawn.
It's Ben Ben McKelvey there with his own field of dreams. It's coming up to 6 o'clock. A lot of feedback in on the Colin Craig case. This one probably sums it up, really. I don't like any of the people involved in this Colin Craig case, this listener says. Don't like the witnesses, don't like the lawyers. They should all be sent to an offshore island and left to their dangerous liaisons and grown-up tantrums. So there you go. Well, stay with us tonight. We are just coming up on Checkpoint. New research could force Christchurch bars to call last drinks that little bit earlier. And Tuvaluans in New Zealand celebrate their language week. But first, Anna Thomas with the news.
RNZ News at 6. Good evening, I'm Anna Thomas. The former Conservative Party leader Colin Craig says he has no regrets about sending out the leaflet that a jury has found was defamatory. The jurors this afternoon found Mr Craig defamed the head of the Taxpayers Union, Jordan Williams, in the pamphlet and at a news conference during last year's election campaign. They awarded Mr Williams $1.27 million in damages. Mr Craig told Checkpoint the verdict in the High Court in Auckland was surprising, totally unexpected and disappointing. Justice Kate has reserved her decision on whether to set aside the verdict as sought by Mr Craig's lawyer. Mr Craig says if she lets the verdict stand, an appeal to a higher court is likely.
I think you can take it for granted that if we reach a point where the judgment is entered, we will have to seriously look at an appeal, and it's pretty likely. But that's premature to say anything definite. This is something the legal team will work on if and when we get to that point.
And Colin Craig says he still has the view that dirty politics is unacceptable in New Zealand and shouldn't be condoned in any way. The lawyer for Jordan Williams, Peter McKnight, says Mr Craig's lack of regret for the comments in his leaflet is extraordinary. Mr McKnight told the programme Mr Craig's comments are extremely concerning and could be further defaming Mr Williams. He says the issue at the trial came down to credibility and the jurors had spoken and made their award. Mr McKnight says Mr Williams may be seeking costs from Mr Craig, which he estimated could be as high as $1 million. Land earmarked for a school in South Auckland is to be developed for transitional housing for up to 250 homeless families. The Social Housing Minister, Paula Bennett, has announced 51 pop-up homes will be built on the vacant Crown land for families before they move into permanent accommodation. The Education Ministry owns the 1.6 hectare site in Luke Street, or Tahuhu, but the Social Housing Minister, Paula Bennett, told Checkpoint it won't be using the site for several years, so has leased it to Housing New Zealand. She says it's likely the tenants would pay up to a quarter of their incomes to rent the homes, but there are other options.
We have done deals in other areas like this where we've got them in transition leave, where we've instead used their 25% to help them pay off debt, which we're kind of open to in some situations. I mean, I really see this housing as a way to stabilise some families, help them get rid of some of the debt while we look for that more permanent home.
Paula Bennett, the Social Housing Minister. The police say the cause of a big fire at an Auckland plastics factory was electrical. 100 firefighters fought the blaze at Total Plastics in Henderson earlier this week. Fire safety investigators say the damage to the factory would have been minimised if sprinklers and alarm systems had been installed. Businesses appear to be more upbeat about the economy and their own outlook. In the ANZ Business Outlook survey for September, a net 28% of firms are optimistic about the year ahead, up 12 points on the previous month. The services sector is most confident off the back of strong tourism and migration. Businesses in agriculture are more upbeat after some solid gains in dairy prices and a forecast payout. The chief economist at ANZ Bank, Cameron Bravery, says the strength in the survey suggests solid economic growth.
Businesses very confident both about the general economy, their own outlook for their firm. They're out there prepared to hire more staff, profitability expectations are on the up. You have very good nuances and encouraging signs towards growth going forward.
And Cameron Bravery says inflation expectations remain low. A Christchurch woman says she's lost faith in the police after her home was burgled twice in 7 weeks. Her comment comes as new figures show the number of burglaries remains stubbornly high, with a 15% increase nationwide in the year to August. Burglars first hit Alana George's home in July, stealing an Xbox, a PlayStation and a video camera. 7 weeks later, they were back.
So they took my son's new camera, which he'd had maybe less than 2 weeks. So, I mean, he was absolutely gutted because he's so into making his wee sort of short movies and stuff. And this time they took all of my jewellery.
And Alana George says the police failed to follow up with her after she reported the stolen PlayStation was for sale on Trade Me, or when she asked whether the fingerprints from the 2 burglaries were from the same person. The presidential candidate Hillary Clinton says her rival Donald Trump appears to have violated American law by breaking a trade embargo with Cuba. The US magazine Newsweek reports Mr. Trump's company secretly conducted business in Cuba. It says the company spent at least $68,000 in Cuba in 1998 after funneling the cash through a consulting firm to make it appear legal. Mrs. Clinton says the report shows that Mr. Trump puts his personal and business interests ahead of the laws and policies of the US. Mr. Trump's spokesman, Kellyanne Conway, says the money was not paid and he is against deals with Cuba. It is 6:05. To sport now, and New Zealand have made a breakthrough early on the opening day of the second cricket test against India in Kolkata. Pace bowler Matt Henry called into the side to replace leg spinner Ish Sodhi bowled opener Shikhar Dhawan in his first over to have the hosts 1 for 1. A short time ago, India were 20 for 1. The Black Caps skipper Kane Williamson was a late withdrawal from the match, suffering from a virus, with Ross Taylor leading the side. Henry Nicholls replaces Williamson in the batting lineup, while the other change sees off-spinner Jitan Patel come in for the injured Mark Craig. Argentina will try to pace themselves, looking to finish with more stamina in their quest for a first ever win over New Zealand in the Rugby Championship test in Buenos Aires on Sunday. The Pumas scored more points against the All Blacks than in any previous clash, and were the equal of their opponents for nearly 3/4 of the Hamilton test 3 weeks ago. But they couldn't maintain the effort, eventually losing 57-22. And loose forward Javier Ortega Deseo believes his side has learnt from that match, and Buenos Aires could see them end their 23-test winless run against the All Blacks. And a Tokyo panel has urged changes to 3 venues for the 2020 Olympics in the face of ballooning costs. Tokyo touted access to a $6 billion war chest when it beat Madrid and Istanbul in its successful 2013 bid. The proposed changes could include moving rowing and canoeing 400 kilometres from Tokyo. And that is the news.
Nick Cave completed his latest album in the wake of a personal tragedy, but can music be separated from the circumstances surrounding its creation? I'm Nick Bollinger and I'll be considering Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds' Skeleton Tree in the sampler.
You fell from the sky and crash landed in a field.
I'll be talking to Canadian-born Nashville singer Lindy Ortega and reviewing a retrospective set of acoustic recordings by Jack White. That's in the sampler tonight at 7:30, part of Nights on RNZ National.
And now the Met Service weather to midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland, Coromandel Peninsula and Bay of Plenty. Cloudy periods, a few showers, more frequent about Auckland for a time today. Waikato to Whanganui, including Taumaranui, Taupo and Taihape. Scattered showers, some heavy inland during the afternoons and evenings. Isolated thunderstorms from Whanganui and Taihape northwards until tonight. From Manawatu to Wellington, also whited upper, fine and cloudy periods and a few showers. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, a few showers, mostly about the ranges, fine spells increasing tomorrow. Marlborough Sounds, Nelson, Buller, Westland and Fiordland, scattered showers, possibly heavy inland this afternoon and evening. And the remainder of Marlborough, Canterbury, Otago and Southland, scattered showers this afternoon and evening, some heavy inland and possibly thundery from Canterbury southwards. A few showers returning to Marlborough, Eastern Otago and Southland tomorrow afternoon. And for the Chatham Islands, mostly cloudy, occasional rain tomorrow. It is 6:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thanks very much, Anna. Well, it started with allegations of dirty politics and ended with perhaps the largest defamation payout in New Zealand history. Former Conservative Party leader Colin Craig was found this afternoon to have defamed lawyer Jordan Williams by a High Court jury, which also determined that Mr Craig should fork out more than $1.2 million in damages. Mr Craig told Checkpoint earlier on this evening that he had no regrets about sending out the leaflet that was found to be defamatory. That was a statement that Jordan Williams' lawyer said was extraordinary. Well, our reporter Sarah Robson has been covering the case and filed this report on what happened in the High Court in Auckland today.
Mr Williams successfully claimed that Mr Craig had defamed him in a pamphlet delivered to 1.6 million households, in which he accused Mr Williams of a smear campaign to oust him from the Conservative Party leadership. In the pamphlet and in media statements, Mr Craig claimed that Mr Williams had spread false allegations about his relationship with his former press secretary Rachel McGregor. But just before 3 p.m. today, the jury at the High Court in Auckland sided with Mr Williams. Mr Craig waited for nearly an hour inside the court and then, with his wife Helen at his side, he addressed the waiting media.
Obviously, rather surprised and disappointed with where we reached today. I won't say anything further though, because obviously there's still legal steps in play. So I'll restrict my comment to very, very surprised and disappointed, and obviously we'll just say more as this unfolds.
Can you just clarify what position you're asking for now?
Well, look, as I understand it, the next issue is simply to put it back to the judge for further consideration. But that's with the legal team, and we'll let you know more as we go along.
So are you appealing? What's your take on this?
As I said, I think the next step is it's just in the judge's hands for consideration. Beyond that, we'll see what happens after that.
Mrs Craig, what's your take on this?
Oh, I don't have anything to say about it at this stage. Thank you.
Why are you surprised by it?
Well, no, I'll leave my comment to that because, again, this is something that's still in play legally. We'll say more as that unfolds.
Earlier, a clearly relieved Jordan Williams thanked all his supporters for standing by him.
Particularly, I'd like to thank the support of my legal team, Peter McKnight, Ali Romanos and John Langford, for their unfailing support over the last 12 months.
What does this mean for Rachel?
I don't have Rachel can speak for herself, but as you know, Jess, there'll be some new material becoming public on Monday, which will put that in perspective. Thanks very much.
Peter McKnight is the lawyer acting for Mr Williams, and he singled out a special moment for his client.
The best reaction was his mother. She was just so relieved and so delighted, and to see his family, it's absolutely great.
And the lawyer also said Mr Williams had faced a formidable opponent.
Craig is a very wealthy, powerful man. He has his lawyers and he has his Queen's Counsel, and they just threw everything at it, everything. So we threw everything back, I can assure you. So I think you saw the result there today. But the best thing is the jury accepts the word of Jordan and Rachel.
For Checkpoint, Sarah Robson, aho.
It's 12 minutes past 6. It's Checkpoint and I'm Guy Espiner. Great to have your company this evening. Well, one moment it was normal commuter journey. The next minute, absolute chaos. One person died, more than 100 were injured after a crowded US passenger train crashed through a barrier and into a New Jersey station. The investigators still trying to work out exactly what happened here, what the cause of the crash was. Witnesses say the train was travelling at high speed. The BBC's Nick Bryant reports.
A packed train entering a crowded station at the peak of rush hour. A routine morning commute that turned in an instant into a terrifying ordeal. The train kept up its speed as it entered the station, ploughing through crash barriers at the end of the track, slamming into the wall of a waiting area.
The second car kind of like jumped a little bit onto the first, like where we were standing, so it kind of like crushed that little center where people were.
It was like a big crash, and then everything from the ceiling just like fell in.
I saw one woman, she was on the ground, she needed medical, she started to receive medical attention, but then they kind of just left her there, and so I figured there was nothing more that they could do for her. She was just lying in like a pool of blood.
The engine was at the rear, pushing the passenger carriages. They bore the brunt of the crash. So powerful was the impact of the crash that part of the roof caved in, turning the concourse into a jumble of collapsed pillars, twisted metal and hanging wires. The woman who died was killed by falling debris. Hoboken is in New Jersey, across the Hudson River from New York City. Many commuters use this busy station to travel into Manhattan, and many tend to pack the front carriages of the trains to shave a few minutes off their journeys. 108 people were injured, and most of them were on board the train.
The silver lining is that there's only been one fatality thus far, because the destruction really is significant, and the power of the train coming in is obviously devastating in its impact.
The cause of the crash is not yet known. The train's engineer was critically injured, but is conscious and cooperating with investigators. New Jersey Transit hasn't completed installing what's called positive train control, a safety system designed to prevent accidents by automatically slowing or stopping trains that are going too fast. It had been ordered to install the system by the government, but there have been repeated delays.
That's Nick Bryant from the BBC. It's 6:15 on Checkpoint. Back home now, a new study has cast doubt on Christchurch City Council's plans to let pubs and bars stay open as late as 3 o'clock in the morning. The council had originally tried to change the rules to close bars earlier to reduce the harm caused by drinking, but now it's softened its stance. Maya Burry reports.
The Centre for Alcohol Policy Research at Melbourne's La Trobe University analysed 21 separate studies on trading hours and alcohol-related harm in 8 different countries. The study's lead author, Claire Wilkinson, says it found a similar pattern.
The majority of studies found that when you reduce alcohol trading hours for on-premise, that is pubs and hotels and bars, there was reductions in alcohol-related violence. And likewise, when there were increases in trading hours, there were subsequently increases in alcohol-related violence.
The Christchurch City Council is proposing to have a maximum 3 a.m. closing time for bars in the city centre, with suburban bars having to close up shop at 1 o'clock in the morning. It's backed down from an earlier proposal that would have seen a one-way door policy in the CBD from 1 a.m. It has also allowed bars along a semi-residential part of the city centre to remain open beyond 1 in the morning for a 3-year transitional period. The director of the lobby group Alcohol Health Watch, Rebecca Williams, says that's a mistake.
Christchurch City Council is really foregoing a huge opportunity to make a difference in terms of health and safety in Christchurch. Softening up their position on trading hours is a big, big mistake. They've got a once-in-a-6-year opportunity to make a difference, and they are deeply, deeply at fault if they don't take it.
But Hospitality New Zealand's regional manager in Canterbury, Amy McClellan-Minty, says the council's new stance still doesn't go far enough. She says many suburban bars will suffer if they have to close at 1 in the morning, and the hospitality industry isn't the problem.
We can't serve minors, we can't serve intoxicated people. They're looked after. So if community groups want the bars shut earlier, expect the party to be right next door to them, because that's what will happen. People aren't going to go home and go to bed or go home and watch reruns of Coronation Street. They will continue to drink in an uncontrolled environment.
The Christchurch City Council declined to be interviewed by RNZ News. It says people will be given the chance to have their say on the changes it has made to the proposed alcohol policy. In Christchurch for Checkpoint, Maya Burry.
17 minutes past 6, tensions are rising between Russia and the United States over the repeated bombardment of the Syrian city of Aleppo. The US Secretary of State John Kerry says America is on the verge of suspending talks with Russia after days of heavy bombing there. It appears that hospitals in Aleppo have been particular targets in this bombing. The ABC's Anne Barker filed this report.
In the hellhole that is eastern Aleppo, a tiny glimmer of hope. Dramatic footage has emerged of a 5-year-old girl being pulled alive from the rubble of an airstrike. Rescue workers call to her after finding her buried in the ruins of a 5-storey building. "We're coming for you," they cry. As they pull her out, the little girl screams for her papa to hold her hand. But for one girl saved, another 23 people were killed in the same airstrike, her father probably among them. For more than a week, Russian and Syrian warplanes have launched hundreds of airstrikes to recapture the city's east from rebel forces. The United Nations has expressed a deepening despair. Its Under-Secretary for Humanitarian Affairs is Stephen O'Brien.
Let me be clear, East Aleppo this minute is not at the edge of the precipice. It is well into its terrible descent into the pitiless and merciless abyss of a humanitarian catastrophe unlike any we have witnessed in Syria, with no access by the United Nations since the 7th of July, and the health sector in East Aleppo is now reportedly on the very verge of total collapse.
Of real concern, he says, is the use of new weaponry that can reach even those sheltering deep underground.
The alleged use of new bunker-busting bombs has reportedly caused mass destruction in an area that has already been decimated. This means that I've received reports that there are bodies of babies, children, women and men stuck unrecovered in the rubble of the basements up to 20 metres down where they had taken refuge and where they had been safe till the use of these new and recently introduced weapons had claimed their lives.
It's weapons like these that have caused such a staggering death toll. The US Secretary of State John Kerry says 400 people have died in Aleppo in 8 days, a quarter of them children. The US has now all but given up on the chance of a new ceasefire in Aleppo. John Kerry says talks with Russia lack sense when it refuses to stop the bombing.
I think we're on the verge of suspending the discussion because you know, it's irrational in the context of the kind of bombing taking place to be sitting there trying to take things seriously. There's no notion or indication of a seriousness of purpose with what is taking place right now.
The US has left open the door for a change of heart in Moscow, but Russia says it will continue to support the Syrian government's campaign, and a Foreign Ministry spokeswoman, Maria Zakharova, blames the US for the failed ceasefire. We underline once again the need for the separation of so-called peaceful opposition and terrorists. We call firstly on the United States and all those in the region who have a relevant influence to produce such a separation. Only in this way can peace be fulfilled. The US insists it won't use military force against the Syrian government, but efforts to find a political solution appear doomed, meaning for now there is no solution at all.
Anne Barker with that report. It's 21 minutes past 6. You're listening to Checkpoint with me, Guy and Espiner. Back home now, a Northland man with cerebral palsy who's worked with councils for years says that condition would not get in the way of a Dunedin man standing for public office. A Dunedin City Councillor and mayoral candidate Lee Vandervis told disabled man and council candidate Joshua Perry that he was not fit to stand for office because of his cerebral palsy. But Northland man Johnny Wilkinson, who's running for the local DHB, says those views are from the dark ages.
I think his comments were incredibly antiquated. He sounded like someone out of the 1950s. I guess he would say that Stephen Hawkins could no way be a physicist.
Have you had any comments like that in Whangarei? Ever come across those sorts of attitudes?
No, I haven't. In fact, I think that none of the candidates standing for local government would even dare contemplate such a thing.
You served for 2 terms on the Disability Advisory Committee for the District Health Board. Was that difficult? Did you find any particular challenges there, apart from the obvious physical ones?
No, not at all. Apart from, convincing the chair of the board what the function of the statutory committee was, I found no problem at all.
It's Northland man Johnny Wilkinson talking there to our Northland reporter Lois Williams. It's 23 minutes past 6 on Checkpoint. The French President François Hollande has visited the town of Danematin-en-Gaule, just outside Paris, to reopen a printing factory which was the site of a terrorism standoff last year. The two men forced their way into the building after attacking the offices of Charlie Hebdo. The BBC's Lucy Williamson reports.
President Hollande stood side by side with Michel Catalano as the Printworks owner battled his emotions to tell his story and to thank Mr. Hollande for coming to Dammatin on the day of the siege. As police and special forces ringed the factory in January last year, the two attackers held Mr. Catalano inside his office, while an employee hid on the floor above. Both escaped unharmed, and today Mr. Hollande presented the two men with the Légion d'honneur. Their courage and the reopening of the company, the president said, was a sign that France was stronger than the threat it faced.
I wanted to come back to show that a symbol of barbarity, where terrorists had attacked the security forces, could come to symbolize what human will is capable of. Human will is not only the drive to resist, but also to build and rebuild.
Repeated attacks here over the past 2 years have divided political leaders as they head into a presidential election campaign. Some have urged preventative detention for anyone thought to be radicalised, while others insist that citizens' right to liberty must be preserved.
That's Lucy Williamson from the BBC. 26 Indonesian fishermen who allege they were treated like slaves while working in New Zealand waters are taking their fight for unpaid wages to the Court of Appeal. They say their employer, the South Korean corporation, Sayo Ongyang, is dragging them through the court system to avoid paying the millions of dollars that they are owed. Our employment reporter Max Toll filed this report.
In 2012 and 2014, the Crown seized 2 trawlers owned by Sayo Ongyang after convicting it of fisheries crimes. The company wants its boats back, but the fishermen say it should be sold and the money used to pay them back, an argument the High Court agreed with in December. They've been waiting to be paid between $4 and $6 million in wages since 2011, when they last docked in Lyttelton. Their lawyer, Karen Harding, says for 4 years they worked in conditions akin to slavery and deserve compensation.
They were riddled with cockroaches, they had to sleep in wet bedding, the food had fleas and insects in it, they had to actually bathe together in the same water, and it was seawater they had to bathe in. Some of the fishermen also got skin disease from it. They were working between 18 to 20 hours a day. This is every single day of their contract.
She says the men came to work in New Zealand because they thought it was a safe place. Beforehand, the company made them put up the most valuable thing they could as collateral.
They put up their mothers' houses and the paddy fields as security for the job. They put up things like their neighbour's vehicle. One person put up the house certificate of the mosque leader, and another one, all he had was his graduation certificate from primary school. And if they had have walked off the vessel in port, then they would not have got the withheld wages, and they would have lost their mothers' lands and paddy fields and rendered their families homeless.
The men are currently back in Indonesia, living below the poverty line in third world conditions. Many are unemployed. In 2010, one of Sayo Ongyang's trawlers sank in New Zealand waters, killing 6 men. That sparked a government investigation, and consequently all foreign charter vessels must now be New Zealand flagged. The court hearing is due to begin in 2 weeks. For Checkpoint, Max Toll.
Coming up to 28 minutes past 6, lastly on Checkpoint tonight, it's Tuvalu Language Week this week. Here's Indira Stewart.
Tuvalu is the 4th smallest country in the world, with a population of about 11,000. There are fears that it will be uninhabitable within decades. So this week's theme, Ulu ki te whatu e malu e koe, specifically focuses on the threats of climate change and rising sea levels. It translates to shelter in the rock for your safety. New Zealand is home to about 3,500 Tuvaluans who are among the country's newest migrant communities. Maramati Pole witnessed most of the families moving here over the last 15 to 20 years.
About 19 years ago, when I first moved to Auckland, we would all come together whenever a new family would arrive from Tuvalu. We'd meet in the Hall in Grey Lynn at the Tuvalu Tuvalu church there and would welcome each family that would just arrive to New Zealand with a massive feast. It was so special.
Ms Dipole says the Tuvaluan community has blossomed, but many families have not been able to return home since.
If you want to go to Tuvalu, you know, a return trip is over 2,500. How can you take your whole family back home? So, you know, it's up to us to keep our own language alive.
63-year-old Tapanya Taiki agrees and says the threats of losing their country to rising sea levels have pushed elders like herself to pass on as much as they can about their culture.
We love our country and we don't want our country to disappear under the water. It's really scary. We're going to lose everything, and that's why it's so important for us to keep up with our culture and our language, because that's the only way we can show the world that we are still here.
On Thursday, members of the community gathered at the local library to celebrate. I asked 10-year-old Fiafia Te Papau o Atua what he loved most about being Tuvaluan.
Because I just like dancing. It's like cool.
His friend Tapelu agrees.
Doing fatele, or when girls stand up to like move and the boys bang and like sing and that. Yeah. And we lead it. We have to lead it.
That report from Indira Stewart, and that's us for Friday. Thanks for watching. Thanks very much for listening as well. And from all of us here at the Checkpoint team, have a great weekend.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. I'm Anna Thomas. The former Conservative Party leader Colin Craig says he has no regrets about sending out the leaflet that a jury has found was defamatory. New figures show a rise in the number of robberies, assaults and burglaries. And the Black Caps have taken 2 quick wickets on the opening day of the second cricket test against India in Kolkata. Our next news and weather is at 7.
They hold up banks and some shoot blanks. Do you like agapanthus?
I absolutely detest agapanthus.
I like them when they're in bloom properly.
Crazy difficult to get out. Actually, I love it. And it keeps the weeds down in the garden.
You know, I don't like them particularly. I've got them in my garden though.
Plus, donating old fishing gear to help families in the Pacific feed themselves, and the first 3D images of our galaxy have just landed on Earth. So what can they tell us? Find out this way up, Saturday after 12 here on RNZ National.